nitrogen and hydrogen. Always put hydrogen on top. Start with the carbon, go to nitrogen, and then go to oxygen. If you look in the balance of the forces, field forces, you notice something very, very strange. Which this goes back to the picture which I drew just now. And then you understand the work of the gravity and magnetic field on the structure of the leaves and the plants, and what has become fallacy of photosynthesis. 12, 14, 16. 16, strongest tries to feed the carbon to bring it to its strength. Carbon 12 is getting fed by the nitrogen to be brought into balance. Same time, you have an oxygen of 16 trying to feed nitrogen to bring it up to its own energy balance. So you have created a dynamic flow. Somebody's microphone is open. So this is how it becomes the base gravitational. But at the same time, you have opposite base gravitational too. In fact, if you look, you have 12, you have 14, you have 16. 2 trying to feed, and the balance, what comes up, is very much, very little. Very little. Which this little, in the isotopes of the total carbon, oxygen, nitrogen, which we have a connection line, feeds the gravitational need of hydrogen. Which that, in turn, itself, as receiving of the equal strength of itself, it becomes the feeder, balancer to the others. And because this has a slightly more hydrogen, becomes the energy source. As we see, CH3, the sugar. Anything which has an energy base on this planet is connected to the presence of the hydrogen. Now you understand this process, then you understand how the effect of gravitational magnetic field of the planet and the sun dictates and changes everything as they retract or they push in. This is the photosynthesis. This is what we understand, and that's how it works. If you take the pressure out, and this is one of the reasons every one of us, we go to the shop and buy fertilizer, nitrogen. Because as long as we can keep this block or this guy in control, these guys will do the work according to the structure of the pressures of gravitational magnetic field of the planet. So for the first time we understand the operation and the need of nitrogen in the plants. Is the balancer of it. When it's not enough of it, the two cannot operate properly. Then the gravitational field of the planet cannot interact correctly for them to grow. Then, if you understood this, you understand why even the CO2 you add to your water of the plants changes them to grow more. Because you create the condition of the gravitational field of the planet, which is providing more field forces for the carbon balance to be in operation, that the nitrogen itself becomes irrelevant. And then the plant absorbs everything which balances all the amino acid pressures. So now, instead of relying on the growth only by nitrogen, which is the present time work of fertilizer, now every element of the carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen is there to feed, so the plant grows faster. Now you have three mothers feeding the same child, not one, and depending on the time and the place. This goes back, if you can create it at the same time at the plant, you understand, you create the environment of the plant, you're always in balance. More or less, if in the future research center, people who deal with the uh, vegetation and life, they will measure, they will see a more balanced power, not much difference between average during the day and night. This is the new, and this is the correct way to understand the process. Then it changes the same for the fish in the sea, and it changes the same thing for the lion in the jungles. Because we learn to work through the essence of the creation, which is the amino acid itself, and in that process understanding, we need to bring all the factors and understand all the factors. It's very easy. The lady in the speech, in the teaching says, a proton comes and goes here and then there is electron. What is the game of the proton? What is the game of oxygen or the electron or a proton or whatever? These are all plasmas. Because they have not understood this process, then this plasma creates a pressure, a magnetic gravitational pressure, gives it a new position, which that position creates a new direction where the oxygen is absorbed to, taken, or the carbon is rejected because of, and vice versa. Then we understand why has been a mystery for years. They've been telling us to not sleep under the tree at night because the carbon intake is very high. Because the gravitational magnetic field creates that structure that you create in your CO2 box, which with the presence of the nitrogen creates the same gravitational magnetic field plus the gravitational field of the earth that calls in for energy of the carbon to be enforcing the condition on the nitrogen inside, which at that level there is no need, there is no strength for the oxygen to be as a field transfer available. Goes back again, no carbon ever crosses the boundary of the leaf. The pressure on the nitrogen through the gravitational magnetic field, which is in the leaf, creates a condition of transfer of energy of the carbon as a matter state through the plasma, through the leaf, and then the vice versa during the daytime. No carbon ever crosses the boundary of the leaf of a plant. The same as the lung of the man. The way we breathe and we explain the conversion of the energy through the lung to the blood, the same process happens in this place. Don't forget, you are looking by habit as the leaf. If this is the leaf, the same as what you've done with the mistake of physicality. If I draw this leaf in the three-dimensional, I'm not a very good drawer. And this is the environment within the leaf. Here, this environment is in gravitational magnetic field Gans state, is not in the matter state, even though you have the skin of the plants. The skin of the leaf is the skin of the body of the man, holding the plasma of the gans of the body of the element, which is the leaf content inside. This is why, if you understand even deeper that this is made of amino acid, Mr. Cohen, then we understand why plants have emotion, and if we can tune into the gravitational magnetic field of them, we can communicate with them. Because they are made of the same amino acid from the same environment that you and me and everything else is created out of. Now, the life and the science of the creation in the dimension of the what we call vertical people has different meaning if you understand this fully. Then in the planet Zeus, you decide you want to be the vertical, not to move when everything comes to you. You use the environmental gravitational pressure, or you become the horizontal people and you move to collect more of different things and not one. You become the traveler on a jet plane in different directions from China to United States and then South America, or you decide I'm a local guy, I'm not moving from the village, but I take everything what comes in the village. Become what we call the vertical people. Now, with the science and understanding the true process, the photosynthesis goes through the window, doesn't it? Because in this environment which you have created, you have all the elements, the nitrogen, the carbon, the hydrogen, that you do not even need to absorb water from the ground, because in that process of photosynthesis, what you call it, in this process of what we call plasma interaction, you create the gravitational magnetic field of the water, the same as the lung. You produce your own moisture. This is important for governments like Chinese government to understand what is their worries in the, what is the desert moving towards Beijing. If they understand this, they can create a condition that vegetation can grow without any need for anything. And in a way, by rooting, stop the movement of the deserts at the boundaries of Beijing. But this needs a lot of understanding. But when you create this condition, you don't plant plants which are not suiting the gravitational magnetic fields of the environment, like as we saw the tree line in the mountain, but vegetation which fit into this environment will grow themselves. You have to work in harmony with the environment. If you force it, then you have to fight it. If you create a condition which uses the true gravitational magnetic field of any destination, be it the desert, be it the sea, be it on planet Zeus, you can live. You can create a condition that is what you need for the time you need it. The creation of the deserts on this planet is done because of the what we call the angle of the planet. The planet starts from the north and rotates down, and it goes through that phase of desert and then coming down to the equator, and then the planets on the equators, they ball in and it turns over. If you go back to the history of, let's say, United Kingdom, it used to be some time ago part of a desert, and it used to be at the bottom of the sea in another time, through the angle of the rotation of the planet, which everything rotates. It takes billions of years, but they come up. The evidence of his is geologists. They can tell you very much exactly where you've been and what has been. It takes billions of years, but what is created in the North Pole gradually becomes part of the equator on the landmass. And this is, we cannot stop this process. But in so many ways, as it goes through it, you have to understand, then it shows why we cannot create, or we don't see as such vegetation in the desert area. Leave it to me, I make the deserts to be the oasis, green as what we call jungles of Amazon, because I understand why. But then this brings another problem for us. Where does then, if we do such a thing, will create a dynamic flow on the surface of the planet for the evolution and rotation of the magnetic field of the matters we call air. We need the hot and cold and the temperature difference to create this dynamic atmosphere that it guarantees life. And this planet has got used to it and it's adjusted itself in evolution. As it's happening slowly, it matches up itself. As I said before, without the dust from the deserts of Central Africa, there'd be no life, more or less, very limited life in the Atlantic Ocean. Because the dust from the desert, this red dust, becomes the beginning of the life when it lands in the ocean. Millions of tons of it. If we stop this, then what happens to the food which is needed as fish that so much man relies on? We become an integrated system. We cannot change it. One is depending on the other. But in places we can create small deviations, but not by what happened with the Israelis with Sinai Desert. Tarmac it, put a new soil on it, and put orange trees, and when you cannot control it, the whole thing goes collapsing. Read about the Jaffa orange, how the Israelis created it in the Sinai Desert after the 6-day war when they took the Sinai Desert. They grow oranges on a desert land because they tarmacked it and they put new soil and then they put plants. But when you cannot sustain it, then it goes back. But you can create conditions to sustain life, like in the borders of the Beijing, in what they call the deserts, which is moving onto Beijing. Then if you understand this, you can do the same anywhere in the universe. But you have to understand which way the fields are moving. We look into the deep space and we see what we call the darkness. But in time when man becomes educated and creates new tools, we see the same thing. The magnetic fields flow in one direction and later on they flow in another direction. The same process as we have a day and night photosynthesis, as you call it, field flow, the same thing happens in the universe but in a larger scale. In the dimensions, what we see, the pictures coming from NASA, the telescopes they have, and they see the magnetic fields, we see dimensions, environments where the systems and the galaxies are totally rotating different direction in opposition to what is the rest of the area is doing. Why? One is the direction of flow, one is the interaction of the other universes at that point. There's a lot to learn, but we have to understand this basic of the interaction of the fields. This, if you look, the reactor we showed in between, that the amperage changes according to the time. It gives you a lot of knowledge in how you can create lift and motion from any space. For those who are in a space research lab, understand this. I asked you a couple of weeks ago, run such a test to understand. Because if you can create a gravitational magnetic field using the Earth gravitational magnetic field that it matches, you don't need to bend anything. The field of the Earth, like a wind, blows you into the air. But because you have a field strength within the reactors you have created, then you dictate the strength of that wing you want to float, or you want to blow and go as fast as you like. In the new science of space technology, you don't need to burn the fuel, because by adjusting the field strength you left, and you dictate how to and where to and how to blow in the winds of the environment. We've seen this clearly in what happened where Tom Selleck went. Maybe now for the first time you understand how come the rest of the area is flattened by hurricane, but not the house of the mother of Tom. Because the gravitational magnetic field created by the ganses, which has fed the plants and more or less the whole environment with, is not just the plant, they have created a condition that they do not follow. They do not interact with the field of the environment. The wind has no strength to blow through it because they're above it. It's what we call gravitational magnetic field shielding. The shielding comes when you have a strength higher than the environment. It's a bulletproof, even though some wind might go through. Now, the whole science with the experience of what we've done makes sense. There is no mystery, as Tom was showing us in the Tuesday teachings of the, what they call the Earth Council and Universal Council, that he's done this and this is, that's why the mother's house is like oasis. If you have the pictures, please can you put it up, Rick, if you can find it, from Tom Sellers. Now, understanding this, even the photosynthesis becomes meaningless. It's field strength interaction, and we understand this more. This is total part of the structure of what I said. We bring the physical teaching of the matter state into the field, and then is in the soul. Because a plant has a soul, because it interacts, it's a dynamic, so he has a center line. Why can we cut a tree, part of it, cut its wings, cut its leaves, cut its branches, and it still lives, and it gives more? It's a giver, because now it has directionalized its field. This is the beauty with the vertical people, because they have directionalized the stem of the tree. The trunk of the tree is the where I release my energy from whatever I accept collectively through my soul.